You.
Smart circuits.
Smart circuits.
Okay.
Smart targets. Over to you.
Would you like to say the sentence, what are smart targets?
What are...
Hi everyone, welcome back to Sensible SENCO, and today I am sure that Gavin has got something interesting for me to talk about.
Today, Ab's going to talk about what are smart targets.
Oh, okay.
So the first question, of course, is going to be the simplest one. What are smart targets? Over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to do a bit of shameless promotion at this point. So this is another one of my books. It's called Approach It, Map It, Manage It, and it's all about the graduated response, provision mapping and management. And partway through that book, around about page 50-ish, 52, 53, it talks about smart targets. It talks about planning and smart targets for students. Now, I'm pretty sure that as teachers and SENCOs, we know what a smart target is. I'm pretty sure that most people in employment at some point have met the phrase smart target. I love his blank face, it's great. We generally in education use SMART targets: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. Or you can use something called the Colombo strategy. I like the Colombo strategy. Do you know what the Colombo strategy is? So he used to ask the 6 W's, a H and an E.
Who, what, where, when, why.
Where and which.
Yeah, I forget those two.
How and explain.
Ooh.
Okay, so you want to use SMART targets or you want to use the Colombo strategy? Anyway, that's kind of going off tangent a little bit.
Yeah, so he just asked open questions, and it's as simple as that.
But when we're
man.
setting SMART targets, what we're doing is we're not just grabbing some kind of random idea out of the air and going, Gavin, you're going to learn to fly. That's your target.
Cool.
He's excited now. Gavin's target is to learn to fly. That is completely unachievable, unrealistic, definitely not time-bound because I haven't told him how. It would be measurable because I can measure it on his ability to actually fly. Is it specific? What do I mean by fly? I might want to define that slightly. But it's not appropriate as a target.
Okay.
So what are SMART targets? They are targets that are not out of the realms of something that a student could achieve. So we are very specifically choosing something that is within their, let's use some terminology, zone of proximal development. We're going to work within what they can do and just kind of push that boundary a little bit to push them onto the next level. So we're going to set them something specific, to learn to read, measurable, use the reading age, achievable, so maybe we're going to say to read to what level, so it wouldn't be reasonable to ask my 2-year-old to read Pride and Prejudice. Realistic, again, I ain't going to ask him to read Pride and Prejudice, but the Gruffalo might be good. Not as a 2-year-old, obviously. And time-bound. So when do I want him to achieve it by? By the age of 7, that would be good. 5 years, I think we can manage that one. But generally speaking, in SEN terms, we're looking at 12 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks to actually achieve something.
Yep.
Does that answer your question as to what is a SMART target?
It does. So why should we set individual targets for individuals with SEN?
Okay, so it kind of goes back to why do we need plans for students with special educational needs? And we've got schools who say, well, we don't create plans for them. We do passports, which just shares information about the child. The Code of Practice says that we need to be plotting out what we're doing to support students and what we're putting in place for that. And if you're doing a really, really, really great provision map with that information on, then there is a possibility you might be able to get away with generic targets, so to improve the reading age over that period of 3 months or something like that. Okay. However, when you try to do an education healthcare needs assessment, There's a video on that if you want to watch it. When you try to do that, you have to evidence that you've tried to put things in place for children and that they haven't worked. And unless you're setting some individualised targets for those children, it can become quite difficult to prove that things are working with a specific amount of support or are not working despite that level of support. So that's why it's quite important to set those short-term targets, which, you know, let's break reading down. It might be to learn the first 6 phonic sounds, so sat, so we've got a sat pin. I'm still on that kind of phase, I'm afraid. Jolly phonics, yay. Or whatever it is these days. I know it's letters and sounds, and off the top of my head I can't remember what the first 6 sounds are. Anyway, I might want to set that as my target, but maybe I'm working with a child who's in year 4. Is it reasonable for that to take 12 weeks, 18 weeks, 24 weeks? Probably not. I mean, I need to be looking at something 6 weeks maybe. They're going to learn those 6 sounds over 6 weeks. We know when we introduce letters and sounds to children that we're doing it quite rapidly, and we know that some children need that reinforcement and repetition and all the rest of it. But to be in year 4 and still not know those first 6 sounds means we really need to be putting something in place. So we're setting that target and we're showing everything we're throwing at it for that child to achieve that target at that point. And if you're not recording it as a target as such, how are you evidencing that that child still can't do it, or that you've tried everything for them to be able to do it?
So what are your statutory obligations around SEN targets?
So there aren't actually any. Ironically, you do not have to set targets. And I've picked the book back up again because it tells you in the SEN Code of Practice what you have to do. And it says, let me just find the right part. All teachers and support staff who work with the pupil should be made aware of their needs, the outcomes sought. Now, to me, that's a target. What are we aiming for, or a goal? The support provided and any teaching strategies or approaches that are required. It should be recorded on a school's information system. The support and intervention provided should be selected to meet the outcomes identified for the pupil. Again, if that's identifying what we want them to achieve, to be able to read or to know those 6 sounds, based on reliable evidence of effectiveness, and should be provided by staff with sufficient skills and knowledge. So, although it's not saying you must set smart targets, what it is saying is you can't really set something in place for the child without setting a target.
Yeah, without being able to measure it.
Yeah. You might have a target that reads like this if you are going to be really, really fussy. Molly's just a hypothetical student. Needs to improve her reading comprehension skills as measured using Literacy Assessment Online reading test in 3 months' time, with an expected increase from a standard score of 75 to 82 by accessing a graduated reading programme using the dockside books from stage 3 and the accompanying exercises. Molly will be able to read the books at home and discuss the content with her parents, who can use the questions in the back of the books to engage Molly in a general comprehension discussion. Whilst in school, she will attend a 10-minute reading session in the library at 8:40 every morning for a one-to-one session with the librarian, where they will work through the teacher-guided activities. Molly should not speed through the books, but should spend at least 3 days with each one, and this will be reviewed in 3 months. I can guarantee that if you write that as a target, absolutely nobody is going to read it.
It's not smart, no.
So what you do is you write it out as what you want them to achieve. So what I want, my target is to improve reading comprehension skills as measured using Literacy Assessment Online. Mm-hmm. What is my outcome? I want her standard score to increase from 75 to 82 in 3 months. There's that time-bound bit. Okay. How am I going to do it? Give a bit of information. And it all goes back to provision mapping and linking it back to all of those things again, and then who's going to be involved in actually doing it. If you had something like that, and I'm sure Gavin will be able to stick this on the screen for you, but if you have something like this, that is so much easier to read than what I just read out, which is this great big chunk of dialogue here, which nobody in their right mind is going to
Yeah, you have to sift all the information out of that and try to kind of condense it into what you your mind would take from it. But tables, everybody loves tables.
Okay, we all love tables.
I love tables. What is the best way to make sure that SEN targets are actually being set and followed?
I think the answer to that depends on whether you are a primary school or a secondary school.
Okay.
So in a primary school, generally speaking, we only have one teacher per class.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that asking that staff member who teaches that class to take responsibility for setting those next step targets and those SMART targets is probably the best way to make sure that they are being followed. Because if I've written something myself, first of all, I actually know what it is, and secondly, I know whether it's actually achievable within my teaching. Can I actually deliver that kind of thing? And I'm the person planning for my lessons, therefore I'm more likely to think, oh gosh, yes, I put that on Molly's plan, didn't I? I need to make sure I'm building that into it. Because not every target we set for a child with special educational needs is something that is delivered by a TA or out of the classroom or through an intervention. Most of it should be delivered through the high quality first teaching and through the reasonable adjustments made in the classroom, or through the scaffolded and differentiated activities that a member of staff puts in place. So I think that in a primary school, having those class teachers set those targets is possibly the best way forward. Okay. In a secondary school, it becomes far more complicated. So what we could end up with is 17 different teachers over the course of a week for the different subjects, and we may have the history department decide on one set of targets, and the science department decide on something else, and the maths department wants some other focus, the English department wants something else. Because in secondary we're so focused on what our final end results are and our specialism within our subjects that actually we don't go back to what is it that child needs. So the student who comes into us in year 7 with a reading age of 8, let's say, we know as SENCOs that they need to secure their phonic knowledge, they need to learn the high frequency words, we need to be developing their vocabulary, and they are important, but they may not necessarily be seen as important in maths, who want them to be able to multiply by a 5-digit number or something daft like that. So it's very, very difficult in a secondary. So some secondary schools will go to core subjects, so English, Maths, Science usually, and ask each one of them to choose one target that's appropriate for that child. Of course, that's if it's a cognition and learning need. Where the child has a communication and interaction difficulty or has a social and emotional need or mental health need, those members of staff might not be able to make those decisions. And that's where the SENCO comes in terms of advising and suggesting things that are appropriate for that child. And in secondary, again, it's quite tricky as to who delivers that target, who is going to work towards achieving that target. And in the best schools, with the best SEN models, that's going to be everybody working towards the same thing. What we very often see, though, is that it's the SEN department is seen as the ones that are going to cure that problem, and the tutors can just get on with teaching their subject, their knowledge, etc. And that's, most of my career has been in secondary. I've taught primary and I've taught FE, but most of it has been in secondary. And I'm not trying to dismiss any of my secondary colleagues, but that very much is the kind of mindset and the approach to things. By the way, this is sensible, SENCO. This is my life goal.
Sitting on doing nothing, just smiling nicely.
And possibly slightly slimmer.
But we still have the competition to name her on Twitter.
We do.
If anybody else would like to try to name her to win some free resources, you're more than welcome to.
Talking of which, I've been talking to a load of companies this month, and wow, you wouldn't believe the number of free resources they've sent me to share with my viewers. So remember, you need to be a subscriber to take part in those prize draws. It's a real shame.
And that leads us lovely on to the next question. And the question is simply, whose responsibility is it for setting SMART targets?
Well, as we've already established, there is no requirement to set SMART targets, but the Code of Practice says that we need to establish what those outcomes are going to be and how we're going to get towards those outcomes. So it's actually the SENCO's job to oversee all of that. It is a teacher's responsibility to make sure their lessons deliver them. So they can't bypass it.
So the SENCO then puts them together.
Possibly.
The teacher doesn't need to check them to see whether they're actually usable for their students.
I think teachers should be checking them. So if we're talking secondary here, science teacher, if the 3 targets on there are completely unfeasible to deliver through PE or science or something, that member of staff needs to be going back and saying, look, I can't deliver these, but if you could just reword this one slightly, or could we add one extra one about whatever, then yes.
Okay.
It cannot fall. It cannot fall all to the SENCO. The SENCO cannot be responsible for every child in a secondary school with special educational needs. And there was I'm part of a governors group. I am a chair of governors in 3 schools. I am slightly insane. Have I mentioned that before? As part of that governance group, there was somebody posted and they said, I've just been made the link governor for SEN. I'm a parent governor. I've just been made the link governor for SEN. I've been in to see the school and the SENCO is absolutely brilliant, but she's doing everything. And my response to that was, think of it like governance. In governance, we have a strategic role. We oversee things. Head teachers are managers. They manage things. And the SEN Code of Practice, when it changed the SENCO role from being that management role, where you kind of tell people what to do, to becoming a strategic role, sitting above it all, making sure it is happening, challenging where it isn't happening.
Keeping it flowing.
Keeping it flowing, doing all of that. So, SENCO is almost a governance type level within that. And it's quite difficult because if you've been a SENCO in the role for a long time, you tend to do what works for you. Let's face it, we don't like change. Nobody likes change. But as a SENCO, if you've been in that role for a long time, you've worked in that school for a long time, perhaps, you're used to your way of working and perhaps they haven't rolled with the times, they haven't changed things. So it's worked in the past, let's keep going. And I speak to quite a few SENCOs like that, if I'm perfectly honest. And then you've got a new tranche of SENCOs who've come in, who are fresh blood, excited, eager to go, but are scared to challenge because they are new blood and they don't feel that they have the authority for that. They find it very difficult to initiate change within their school because of that. And then you've got a kind of band in the middle of SENCOs who have embraced this strategic way of working and are now looking at how do we move those things. And I think that, again, I tend to see more of it in primary schools than I do in secondary schools. And that's not dismissing secondary schools. There are some brilliant ones out there, but I do tend to see the primary SENCO very much more strategic than I do in the secondary.
And that's very hard to do when you're on a fixed timetable where you've only got 2 days to be able to do that and oversee the whole school. Yeah,
absolutely. And the BASPAR research talks about the timetable for a SENCO and how much time they should have for doing that. And I can only go by what I see in the schools that I talk to. I am involved in a lot of schools. It'd be fair to say in the thousands, not the hundreds, that I speak with over the course of a 12-month period. And I very much see in primaries, I am more likely to find a non-teaching SENCO who is on the SLT. In secondaries, I tend to find SENCOs who have a moderate teaching load, who have an admin assistant perhaps, but that doesn't actually help because all they're doing is filling in the paperwork. And that's not always what an admin assistant does, but that's generally what we find. And they're not really part of the SLT, so they're not able to drive the changes through all the other staff in the school. So they can't get out there to observe it. If they go to the science department, they might speak to the head of science, but they can't go and see all 7 science teachers to go, actually, this is what you should be doing. And when you have a staff meeting in a primary school, even in the big primary schools, it's quite easy to get everybody together, and you're talking about the same thing with everybody, and it's applicable to everybody. But when you're doing a staff meeting in a secondary school, what you tend to end up with is the PE department thinks it's not relevant to them because you're talking about writing, or another department. So it becomes really, really difficult to bring everybody together in a secondary school, more so than a primary school.
Okay. And we do have a time management video due for, I think it's May. Now, whether that actually happens or not, with everything else that's going to happen in
time
May
management.
Time with our really good time management. We've got lots of other stuff going on in May now, but we're still trying to get this time management video put forward because that was something that came up for a lot of SENCOs. How do you deal with your time? How much time are you allocated for it? And what the hell do you do with it all? How do we track and analyse the progress of individual targets?
Well, that depends on how you've actually recorded them in the first place. If we go back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, there is no statutory requirement to actually record those targets, but you have got to record the goals. And if you're just recording it, like that first example that I read out, it actually makes it quite hard to try and unpick and measure, are they working? Now, you know that I use EduKey's learning plans and provision maps, have done for about 10 years now, and I find that a really easy way of doing it. In my book, I do actually show a way that you could record it, so you will pop this on the screen for people to see, that actually shows what you could be putting on a document, a piece of paper, post-it note, whatever it is you want to use, to show what those targets are. But for me, it isn't necessarily putting that target down. It's all well and good writing a target down. What you actually have to do is go back to it and check it. And that's where it comes back to it being smart again, because if it is smart, it is very specific, so we know what we're looking for. It is measurable, so we should be able to measure from one end to the other. It should have been achievable, although let's face it, sometimes they haven't achieved it, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing. It was realistic, which is okay, but it was time-bound. So on there, it's telling me I needed to achieve that reading target in 3 months. So I'm going back to it after 3 months, and I'm redoing that literacy assessment online, which was my reading test, and I am measuring that progress to check have they actually got there. And if they have, fantastic, set my next target, move them on. And if they haven't, why haven't they? And was it because something didn't happen, or because something did happen, like hamster died or coronavirus shut the school down? You know, why is the reason that they didn't get to where they needed to get to that we were using our crystal ball for? We were saying, actually, this is realistic, we think they should get to here, but why didn't they quite achieve what we expected? And that's why I say it's okay to not sometimes achieve targets. I think as SENCOs, we kind of feel like failures when our children don't reach the targets that we've set for them. But if you think about it, if a child achieved every target you set for them, because you are setting quite low expectations, you are not actually doing that child any favours, and you're not moving things forward. And the chances are that if you start to apply for additional funding or for an education healthcare needs assessment, they're going to turn around and go, but they're achieving, they're doing okay, they're moving on. Because you're setting the expectations and the bars far too low. Whereas sometimes you need to set what is realistic to learn those 6 phonic sounds. And if they don't achieve it, to be absolutely honest and go, they haven't achieved it, but I have put in place a one-to-one TA, they've been coming out for 30 minutes every day, they've got a phonic intervention programme, we've done sounds talk. Yeah, we've got all those things in, but they still didn't quite get there. That's okay.
And that allows you to evidence for your EHCAs?
It allows you to evidence for your educational healthcare needs assessments, your EHCNAs. It also allows you very often to apply for your additional high needs funding, because some students, we just need even more for them than we're actually able to put in.
Is there an easy way to create your SEN smart targets?
Yeah.
Well done.
Nice short and
Congratulations.
simple. Yes!
Yes, we can do that. I'm not going to tell you how, though. You have to watch part 2 of TikTok to get that.
Can you tell what we watch at night? Okay, yes, there is easy ways to create SEN targets. So first one is to use an almost formulaic approach. And I will put that formula, or I won't, he will. We will put that formula on the screen for you about what you include to create a SMART target, okay, around it being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. Or you can cheat. So if you are an educator, learning plans and provision maps, they have a library. It has 1,017 targets in there. Yes, I do know exactly how many there are. And you can click on that and it comes up with suggested targets for ADHD, suggested targets for handwriting, suggested targets for multiplication. So whatever you think the child is struggling with, it's got suggested targets in there. And they are generally SMART targets. Okay. If you don't quite like what is in there, that's fine. You can adjust it, you can edit it, you can change it. You can even create blank targets so you can go across and put new ones in. We did a video on that a couple of weeks ago. If you have a look on the website for provision mapping, it will show you me going to that library and those 1,017 targets and looking at it, and you can add to the library yourself. The second thing you could use is a website. So a website I very often recommend is called A Day in Our Shoes, and we'll put the link up there for you. It's an American website, so you just have to bear in mind we're talking about 504 goals and IEP goals, because that's the terminology that they use, and sometimes they're not targets that we might set in our schools, and they talk about language arts rather than talking about English, but they are there, and they are actually pretty good targets, I have to say. So if I hadn't got anything else, I would be going there for some inspiration sometimes. Especially, as we say, teachers should be taking responsibility, so giving them that bank to work from. And there's also another one, I'm pretty sure it's Oregon University that produced it. I couldn't remember who they were this morning. We'll put the link on there for that one as well. They've got a sheet that you can download and you click on it. It's a bit like a hyperlinked PowerPoint is the best way of describing it. So you click to say I want some ASD targets, and it says what kind of ASD targets. Is it expressive language? And you click on that and then it moves you to different types of targets, and they go through in order. So you could use a website. Okay, so there's a couple of new companies out there. There's one called PAGS, which is Profile Assessment and Goal Setting, which is pretty good if you want to find your SEMH type targets and your ASD type targets. And it almost goes through an assessment type process with you that then generates the targets. It does only generate one target from each of 4 different areas, so it's a little bit more restrictive, I suppose, in what you're choosing. So if you wanted 3 targets on I don't know, expressive language, it doesn't allow you to do that at that point, but you know, at least it's something. There's also the Autism Education Trust, so they have a target setting spreadsheet, if you like. So you go through that one and you can highlight and say what it is you want those students to work on. And some schools, of course, have got access to things like B squared or your pivots profiles. What else is it? You've got your Boxhall profile, which generates targets for you. They are pretty smart targets. You choose those from there. And of course, there is the rather fantastic Birmingham Toolkit, which everybody talks about, which has, again, is spreadsheet format. So you can go through and on I think it's a scale of 1 to 14, it breaks it down into literacy strands and numeracy strands around where children are and need to be next. I think that was really good for measuring progress. For me, it's not quite so good in setting SMART targets. You kind of have to take that goal, what the next step is, and turn it into a target. But actually, if you're using that formula that we put on the screen, that's quite easy to do from those things.
Okay. So if you have any further questions on this subject, please leave us a message in the comments box below.
Okay, and I would say please, please, please click the subscribe button. Okay, please, please, pretty please. We have said that once this channel reaches monetization, that the profits from that, I always get the word the wrong way round, that the profits from that will be fed back straight into schools. But until we hit enough subscribers and hours, we won't be monetized. We don't get anything for doing this, so we can't give back what we really want to give back to schools. So hit the like button, because that moves us up the algorithm and more people are likely to watch us. Hit the subscribe button and leave a comment in the comments section below. Take care, guys.
Bye.